Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Lieutenant Anthony Martin. We're honoured to acknowledge Mrs Sharon Bown, National Vice President of the Air Force Association. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. And during this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Pilot Officer William John Lewis. William Lewis was born on the 29th of March 1912 in Geelong, Victoria, the son of William and Margaret Lewis. After William's birth, the Lewis family moved to Bacchus Marsh. His father was gardener and curator of Mattingley Park. After leaving school, William worked as a glass worker and then as a fitter and mechanic. He also briefly served with the military's Militia 6th Battalion. William Lewis enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force on the 1st of April 1940. He began technical training. That July, he married Edna Shea at St Patrick's Cathedral in Melbourne. On the 13th of June 1941, Lewis embarked from Sydney for overseas service, arriving in the United Kingdom at the end of August. As part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, he was one of almost 27,000 Royal Australian Air Force pilots, navigators, wireless operators, gunners and engineers who joined Australian and British squadrons in Britain throughout the course of the war. Lewis underwent thorough training in England and in November 1942 was posted to number 467 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force. He was soon promoted to sergeant and flight engineer, and by December 1943 had been commissioned as a pilot officer and posted to number 463 Squadron, RAAF. On the night of the 10th of May, 31 Lancaster bombers from numbers 463 and 467 Squadrons, RAAF, departed as part of a major Royal Air Force raid from Waddington in England. Their target was the heavily defended railway yards at Lille in France. Pilot Officer Lewis was the flight engineer of Lancaster bomber JOE, one of the squadron's few aircraft carrying an All-Australian crew. 12 Lancasters were lost in the raid altogether, and 50 airmen were recorded as casualties of the mission. One of those killed was Pilot Officer William Lewis. His Lancaster failed to return to base and was presumed to have been shot down by enemy action. After the war, it was determined that the aircraft had exploded, with the bulk of the wreckage falling into a factory south of the target. Also on board the flight were Flight Sergeants John Brown, Colin Eastgate, George Dan and George Jones, along with Warrant Officer Lloyd Mackenzie and Flying Officer Dudley Ward. The airmen who died in the raid were buried in the surrounding area. After the war, the remains of Commonwealth servicemen buried in Europe were examined and identified where possible. Lewis' remains were identified by his engineer's brevet in a common grave at Forest-sur-Mer Communal Cemetery, about 9 kilometres east of Lille. He was reinterred there under the inscription, "His duty fearlessly and nobly done, ever remembered." Lewis left behind a daughter who he had never met, and he was 32 years of age. Pilot Officer William Lewis' name is listed on the roll on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. In the photograph displayed beside the pool of reflection, Pilot Officer Lewis can be seen standing second from the left. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Pilot Officer William John Lewis, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.